If you care about how ordinary families actually survived World War II, not the slogans or propaganda, but the day-to-day problem of keeping food edible when supply lines collapsed, stay with me. This is one of those techniques that quietly kept households alive for years, not weeks, and it almost never shows up in textbooks. Before we get into it, subscribe to the channel now if you value serious survival history and methods that actually worked under pressure. This channel exists to preserve hard knowledge that would otherwise disappear, and this episode is exactly why. What I'm going to walk you through is not folklore and not romantic nostalgia. It is a documented practical method used across Europe and in parts of rural America during World War II that allowed meat to remain safe and usable for up to 5 years without refrigeration. Families relied on it when electricity was unreliable, ice was gone, and ration books could not guarantee protein. This is the kind of information that separates casual history fans from people who understand how societies endure collapse. This method worked because it removed every condition meat needs to rot. The trick was preserving fully cooked meat, completely submerged in rendered animal fat, sealed away from air, moisture, and bacteria. Today it is sometimes loosely referred to as confit or potted meat, but during the war it was simply survival practice. When done correctly, spoilage organisms had no oxygen, no water, and no raw tissue to attack. The fat itself became both preservative and barrier. Households would start with pork, beef, goose, or duck, usually from a seasonal slaughter. Meat was cut into manageable chunks, heavily salted and slow-cooked for hours until fully done. The cooking drove out moisture and killed bacteria. At the same time, fat was rendered separately until clear and free of water. The meat was then packed tightly into ceramic crocks, stone jars, or glass containers and completely covered with hot liquid fat. When it cooled, the fat solidified into an airtight seal. As long as that seal remained intact and the meat was never exposed to air, the contents could last for years in a cool, dark place. World War II families trusted this method because it had already survived centuries. This wasn't invented during World War II. It came from older European farm traditions that predated refrigeration by generations. What made World War II different was scale. Families suddenly depended on it not as a seasonal convenience, but as a long-term protein strategy. Letters, diaries, and post-war interviews describe households opening crocks 5 years later, usually after the war ended, and finding meat still usable. The smell test was decisive. If the fat cap was unbroken and neutral smelling, the meat inside was considered safe. German, French, Polish and Balkan households use variations of this method, often storing crocks in cellars, buried storage pits or unheated pantries. In rural America, especially in Appalachia and parts of the Midwest, similar practices were used when electricity was unreliable or non-existent during the war years. Lard was common, cheap, and abundant, making it ideal for this purpose. This preservation method, actually outperformed early canning in unstable conditions. Canning did exist during the Second World War, but it required jars, rubber seals, fuel, and, well, really precise timing. A single failure could ruin an entire batch. Fat-sealed meat, on the other hand, was much more forgiving. Even if containers were a bit crude, as long as the meat stayed submerged and untouched, it remained protected. That made it ideal for families who lacked equipment or honestly lived under occupation where supplies were scarce. Another advantage, actually, was flexibility. When a family needed meat, they'd open the crock, remove what they needed, reheat it thoroughly, and then immediately reseal the surface with melted fat. You can still apply this knowledge today without romanticizing it. If someone wanted to apply this method now, the process would be straightforward, but, disciplined. Meat must be fresh and clean, heavily salted and fully cooked. Fat must be rendered slowly until all moisture is gone. Containers must be sterile and non-porous. Storage must be cool and dark. Any sign of water, mould, or a broken fat seal means the meat is discarded without debate. Refrigeration families did not gamble with food poisoning, and neither should anyone today. Modern survivalists can use this method as a backup protein system in power outages, off-grid living, or emergency planning. Unlike freezers, it does not depend on electricity. And, unlike jerky, it preserves calories and fats that the body desperately needs under stress. During the war, this meat was often eaten with bread, potatoes, or thin soups, stretching small portions into sustaining meals. This technique faded because, convenience replaced necessity. After the war, refrigeration spread rapidly. Supermarkets normalized constant availability. Skills that required patience and respect for materials were dismissed as old-fashioned. But history shows that convenience is fragile. WWII families did not preserve meat this way because it was quaint. They did it because it worked when everything else failed. Understanding this method is not about reenactment or nostalgia. It is about recognizing that survival knowledge tends to vanish during stable times and becomes priceless during unstable ones. Serious historians know that what people ate and how they stored it often determined who survived long wars and who didn't. If this kind of deeply researched survival history matters to you, subscribe to the channel, share this episode with others who take history seriously, and help keep this knowledge alive. This is how we honor the past and prepare intelligently for the future.